It was just supposed to be a normal night. Sleepovers, video games, and junk food. But sometimes the ordinary can twist into the unimaginable. Scratching sounds in the dark, shadows moving where they shouldn't, and the feeling of being watched became our reality. Over the course of sleepless nights, we learned that fear isn't always in your head. Sometimes it's standing right outside the window, waiting. And when it strikes, there's no running from the unknown.
I was 14 years old, and my friend was 15. One night he asked if I wanted to spend the night at his house. His mom was at work, and his dad was at the gym, so we had the house to ourselves. We were upstairs in his room playing video games when we started hearing scratching noises and light banging somewhere in the house. At first, we didn't think much about it because he had a dog. We assumed it was probably just the dog scratching at something, so we kept playing our game. A few minutes later, the noises came back again, but this time they were louder. We paused the game and decided to check if it was the dog. When we walked into the hallway, we saw the dog lying quietly outside his parents' bedroom door. That's when we realized the noises couldn't have been coming from the dog. Suddenly, we both felt nervous. Thinking that someone might be trying to break into the house, we grabbed 2 kitchen knives and a couple of flashlights. First, we searched every room upstairs. We opened closets, checked behind doors, and looked in every corner. But everything seemed completely normal. Then we slowly made our way downstairs. The house was dark, and the only light came from our flashlights as we searched the living room, kitchen, and hallway. Still nothing. Finally, we decided to check the backyard. It didn't really make sense though, because his backyard was fenced in, and behind the fence there was a steep drop-off into a wooded area. Still, we searched the yard, but again, we found nothing. After that, I suggested we should check the front of the house and walk around the fence line. So we stepped outside and split up. My friend went to the left side of the house, and I went to the right. On the right side, the fence connected with his neighbor's property. When I walked around the corner, I noticed my friend standing completely still. He wasn't moving at all. He was pointing his flashlight toward the woods near the drop-off. Something about the way he was standing made me uneasy. Slowly, I pointed my flashlight in the same direction, and that's when I saw him. A man dressed completely in black, standing perfectly still in the darkness, staring directly at us. The moment we saw the man standing there, completely still and staring at us, panic took over. I yelled, "Run!" We both turned and sprinted back toward the house as fast as we could. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to explode. We ran inside, locked the door, and immediately called 911. A few minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. They searched around the house, the backyard, and even the woods behind the fence, but they didn't find anyone. The officers told us it was probably someone passing through the area, but they also told us to call them again if anything else happened. Later that night, my friend's parents called and told us to stay inside and downstairs just to be safe. So we sat on the couch in the living room, trying to calm down. About an hour later, we were still sitting there when my friend suddenly asked me a strange question. "Did you see that?" I looked at him confused. "See what?" Then he said quietly, "The light. Someone just shined a light through the window from over the fence." About 1 second after he said that, I saw it too. A bright beam of light suddenly flashed through the window. Without hesitation, we called 911 again. The police returned within minutes and searched the area once more. But again, they found nothing. At this point, we were both extremely paranoid. Every small noise made us jump. We stayed awake until his dad finally came home later that night. When he arrived, we explained everything to him. He took us outside to the backyard to check things out. While we were standing there, we suddenly heard footsteps somewhere beyond the fence in the woods. His dad listened for a moment and then told us it was probably just a hunter walking through the area. Eventually, we went back inside and tried to get some sleep. Nothing else happened that night. But unfortunately, that wasn't the end of it. About 2 weeks later, My friend asked if I wanted to spend the night again, and I agreed. Later that night, both of his parents were working again, and we were joking about the strange hunter from before. His dog was outside in the backyard doing its business while we were talking. I walked to the back door and peeked outside to check on the dog. That's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. It looked like someone was slowly peeking over the fence. I immediately called the dog inside and locked the door. We tried to ignore it, thinking maybe our eyes were playing tricks on us. But a few minutes later, while we were upstairs in his room, we heard strange noises coming from outside again. I walked to the window and looked toward the fence, and once again, I saw what looked like a man peeking over it. We grabbed our knives and flashlights again and slowly went out into the backyard. We shined our flashlights toward the spot where we thought we saw him. The light revealed something terrifying. For a brief moment, we could clearly see the outline of a human head near the top of the fence. That was enough for us. We ran back inside the house and called 911 again. The police arrived within minutes and searched the entire area. But once again, they found absolutely nothing.
Before we dive into the most terrifying part of this story, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Make sure to leave a comment and let me know. And if your heart starts racing while listening to this story, tell me that in the comments too. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe or follow, because the story you're about to hear might just steal your sleep tonight.
I was 14 years old, hanging out with my friend Jesse, who was also 14. We were in his living room playing Call of Duty. His parents weren't home that night, so we were being as loud as we wanted. We spent hours playing video games and eating junk food. Eventually, since his parents weren't coming home until the next day, Jesse convinced me to stay the night. At one point, Jesse went upstairs to use the bathroom. While he was gone, I went downstairs so I could call my mom privately and let her know that I was staying over. After a minute or two, I finished the call and went back upstairs. When I walked into the hallway, Jesse was already standing there waiting for me. But something about his expression seemed off. He was staring at me with a confused and slightly worried look on his face. I asked him what was wrong. He told me he thought I had been upstairs the whole time because he heard someone moving around in the bedroom next to the bathroom. I told him that couldn't be possible because I had been downstairs making a phone call. Jesse slowly looked back toward the hallway, clearly unsettled. Then he quietly walked toward the bedroom door, and I followed him. When we reached the door, Jesse leaned in and pressed his ear against it, listening carefully. We both stood there in silence for a few seconds. Then he slowly turned the doorknob and opened it just a little. The room was dark, but there was enough light coming through the window to see most of the room. We looked around carefully. The bed was empty. The closet door was open. Nothing seemed out of place. After a few seconds, Jesse closed the door again. I told him he was probably just hearing things. So we went back downstairs and continued playing video games. We turned the volume back up and started another match. Everything felt normal again. But when the match ended, the loading screen appeared and the TV suddenly went quiet. That's when Jesse and I both looked at each other, because in that moment of silence, we heard something coming from upstairs, a low, strange grunting noise. And it was coming from that same bedroom. Jesse quickly grabbed the remote and muted the TV. We both sat there in complete silence, listening carefully. The strange grunting sound had definitely come from upstairs, from the same bedroom we had checked earlier. But now, everything was quiet again. Jesse leaned closer to me and whispered, "Someone is hiding up there." His voice was shaking. He explained that whoever was upstairs probably stopped making noise the moment the house became quiet. For a few seconds, we just sat there, completely frozen. Then, Jesse whispered something that made my heart start racing.
We need to leave right now. He suggested that we go out through the back door because it would be much quieter than the front door. I agreed immediately. We slowly stood up and walked toward the back door, trying not to make any noise. Every step felt louder than it actually was. Finally, we reached the door. Jesse slowly opened it, and we stepped outside. As soon as we were outside, Jesse pulled out his phone and started calling the police. While he was talking, I looked back at the house. For some reason, my eyes moved toward the upstairs bedroom window. Without really thinking, I turned on the flashlight on my phone and pointed it at the window. For about 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, my heart dropped. Someone stepped into view behind the window. It was only for a brief moment, but I clearly saw the figure of a person standing there. As soon as the light hit the window, the person quickly crouched down and disappeared from sight. Jesse saw it too. That was the moment we both completely panicked. We started running down the block as fast as we could. We didn't stop running until we were several houses away. A few minutes later, we saw a police car pull up in front of Jesse's house with its lights on. Only then did we slowly make our way back. Jesse unlocked the front door for the officers, and they went inside to investigate. While the police searched the house, Jesse and I waited outside near the patrol car. That's when something happened that still scares me to this day. We saw him. The same man who had been at the window. He was quietly walking out from the backyard. He was moving quickly, but at the same time trying to stay silent. The man was extremely tall, probably around 6'5", and looked to be in his mid-40s. Jesse and I immediately ran inside and shouted for the officers to come outside. But by the time the police got there, the man was already gone. No one knew which direction he had run. When the officers searched the bedroom upstairs, they found something disturbing. A large cloth bag had been pulled out from under the bed. Some clothing was missing from the closet. Money was missing from the desk drawer, and the desktop computer had been turned on. Whoever that man was, he'd clearly been inside the house for a while. But after that night, we never saw him again. And to this day, we have no idea who he was.
This happened in the summer of 2008 when I was 12 years old. I was spending the night at my friend Calvin's house. Earlier that evening, Calvin's family came home unexpectedly early, and things inside the house became a little chaotic. Because of that, Calvin and I came up with what we thought was a fun idea. We would set up a tent in the backyard and sleep outside. It was a warm summer night, so it sounded like a great plan. We grabbed a tent from the garage and set it up in the backyard. It only took us about 15 minutes because there was a bright night light in the yard that helped us see what we were doing. Calvin's backyard was surrounded by a wooden fence. On one side of the fence, there was nothing but about 100 yards of thick trees. We lived in a rural area in New Jersey, so the nights were usually very quiet. After setting up the tent, we spent some time joking around, talking, and messing with each other. Eventually, Calvin turned off the backyard nightlight, and we both climbed into our sleeping bags and tried to go to sleep. But there was one problem. I've never been able to fall asleep easily in sleeping bags. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours. Calvin, on the other hand, fell asleep almost immediately. Sometime later that night, while I was still awake, I started hearing a strange sound coming from somewhere near the fence. At first, it sounded like a rattling or creaking noise. It gave me chills, but I tried to ignore it. It was a little windy outside, so I thought maybe the wind was pushing against the wooden fence. Still, something about the sound didn't feel right. The noise kept happening over and over again. After a while, I started feeling really uneasy. Being the only one awake, lying in a tent outside in the middle of the night, hearing strange noises near the fence,
It was enough to make anyone nervous. Eventually, I also felt the urge to go to the bathroom, but there was no way I was stepping outside the tent alone while hearing those sounds, so I gently woke Calvin up and told him to listen. At first, he told me it was probably just the wind, but at least now that he was awake, I felt a little safer leaving the tent. I slowly unzipped the tent and looked toward the direction where the sound had been coming from, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. So I walked over to the side of the yard and turned the backyard nightlight back on. The moment the light turned on, I saw something that made my heart stop. Someone was leaning against the fence. Their head was down, and they were slowly pushing the fence forward.
The sight of someone leaning against the fence made me freeze instantly. I didn't know whether to scream, run, or stay completely still. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I whispered to Calvin what I saw. At first, he didn't believe me and thought it was just the wind or a shadow, but the fear in my voice made him pay attention. For a few moments, we just stared in silence. Then I realized that the person hadn't moved. They were still standing there, almost perfectly still, just leaning against the fence. I told Calvin we needed to get out of there immediately. We quietly unzipped the tent and slowly stepped outside. The moment Calvin's foot touched the grass, he screamed. I jumped out instinctively. "Why did you scream?" I whispered frantically. Calvin's face was pale. "Because someone is standing right next to the tent, arms reach away. I saw them." I couldn't believe it. I looked over and saw the faint outline of a figure just barely visible in the nightlight. Whoever it was, they were close enough to touch the tent if they wanted. We didn't stop to think. We bolted straight for the back door of the house, not looking back. Once inside, we locked the door behind us and tried to calm down. That night, we didn't go back outside. We slept in Calvin's room upstairs with the window closed, but I could still swear I heard the fence creaking and shifting outside. Every time I glanced out the window, no one was there. The whole experience stayed with me for a long time. Even though we were safe inside the house, the fear of someone watching us from outside that fence made it impossible to relax. It was one of the most frightening nights of my life, and I've never forgotten the feeling of seeing that figure standing silently in the dark.